Hi everybody. We're on 1-3 now, which builds on our work that we just did on isolating variables, which in a sense is solving equations. But I'm going to target something a little bit more specific with our math, and it extends outside the walls of the math classroom in the sense that we're dealing with a lot of science. There is certainly some geometry, and we'll talk about the geometry piece, but a lot of what we're doing with formula goes outside of just the math classroom. So I have put down a definition of formula. You can pause the video if it takes you some time to write it down. It's a group of symbols that express a relationship or are used to solve a problem or to make something. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about it. However, let's kind of pause for a second here too. A lot of definitions don't really express the concept of the word or the thought. Think about the word father. I could give you a definition of the word father, but all of you, isn't that such a big word in terms of what it could mean? There are family implications, religious implications. The word father is just so powerful, it can't be really expressed in a definition. Well, formula is kind of similar. And during class time, during our next class on Friday, we're going to talk a little bit about formula in general, okay? Some more. So please try to think of the big picture. So what are some examples of formula? I have 4 of them right here that you may or may not have seen before. I don't think you've seen all of them. You have seen d equals RT, distance equals rate times time. Here's one, momentum. If you're in physics and you're trying to find the momentum of an object, maybe you've used P equals mv. Kinetic energy. There's kinetic energy. There's that formula. And then electrical. If you're either in auto or any of the electrical pieces and you deal with electricity, Ohm's law, you're dealing with some voltage and some current and amps, things like that. And so these are some examples of formula. And what happens in a formula is this. And I've written this down on your paper where the bullet is. You're going to be given information to plug in for all variables except for the one you want to find. And that's a typo on my paper. It says the one you want to find. We're not going to find anybody. It should be a D, find. That will be the variable you isolate or solve for. So in distance equals rate times time, you're going to be given either the distance the object traveled, the speed or the rate at which it traveled, and or the time that it traveled. You're going to be given 2 out of the 3 of them, and you have to find the third. Same here. You'll be given 2 out of 3. Here there are 3 variables too, and you'll be given 2 out of the 3. This one also has 3. Sometimes some are less. There could be even ones with 4, maybe even 5 variables, possibly. Now, you may not be given all this information directly. You may have to do some work to find out the distance that it traveled. It may not be real specific. And guys and girls, we're going to start, as the year goes along here, talk about how it's used in the SAT. The SAT, when you take it in March, will not have direct numbers somehow. Once you're given 2 out of the 3, plug them in and solve. Similar to what we did with isolating variable. So the 2 that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to erase this, so if you want to write any of it down, pause it or go back and write them down. Now, I've given you 2 of the most common formula topics. And I say topics because circle lengths and areas are a topic, and there are some different formulas with them. So then when we're dealing with circles, A equals pi r squared is 1. C equals 2 pi r. Another important one on the right that you've used before is when we're dealing with a right triangle side length. And you know from middle school, I think, or Algebra 1, I'm assuming and geometry, Pythagorean theorem. So if we have that, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's a formula. There are 3 potential variables here because there are 3 side lengths. Here we're dealing with circles. Okay, so then the bullet says you got to know what the variables mean. Look back up at Ohm's law. Look at Ohm's law that you wrote down above. Do you know what the V stands for? It has to deal with voltage. Do you know what the I stands for? It deals with current, and the R starts to deal with amps. So, I mean, you have to know what they stand for. The R in Ohm's law is not the same R that's in D equals RT. So, you have to know what they mean. A equals area of the circle. You have to know what that means. On the SAT, they may or may not give it to you. I can't remember. I'll let you know in class as to whether it's given to you. Or they'll give you maybe a visual, something like this. And then R equals radius. What's the C stand for? You know what C stands for? C equals circumference. So C equals circumference when we're dealing with circles. Now what about pi? Is that a variable? Pi is a constant. Pi is a constant. It's 3.14. It's actually a ratio of circumference to diameter. But we always use 3.14. Over here, A and B are side lengths. So they're sides of the triangle. And then C is the hypotenuse. I had a student a couple years ago whose middle name was hypotenuse. His parents were both math teachers and decided to give him the middle name of hypotenuse. So you have to know what the variables stand for. You've got to know what they mean, or you can't use the formula. Okay? So, last thing I'm going to do is to show you how we can use this. Okay? We'll use it for this one. A equals pi r squared. So, either we're going to be given the area or we're going to be given the radius, and then we have to find the other one. Okay? So in this case, we're going to be given A equals 10 square centimeters. 10 square centimeters for A. So they'll ask you in the problem, find the radius. They could actually eventually define the circumference too. Once you find the radius, plug it in here and then find circumference too. So we'll talk about multi-layers in class on that. Okay? So what we do is 10 equals pi r squared. And now solve for r. So r squared equals 10 over pi. I'm going to go bring it up here. We have to square root both sides. R equals the square root of 10 over pi. Do the math and you will have the radius. Please do the summary for next class, please.